Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and this is the CTP tier list video, which we do every 3 or 4 months as the meta shifts. That has been so heavily requested lately. I don't know what to say. Thank you for having as much passion for the game as I do. So we're gonna jump right into it today with the CTP of Judgment. If you guys don't know how this works, I give you my top 10 picks. I pick 10 characters and I explain more or less why I think those are the best characters to give a CTP of Judgment to. And we go through all 10 CTPs, sort of. We skip Veteran, obviously, because it's very hard to get, and it's very rare, and it's very niche, and it's also not the best CTP for anything, so you're actually not missing out on that much. And I basically just explain about the CTPs. Now, there is going to be one difference this time for this video. In the past, when I've made these videos, and I've made quite a few of them, I have completely ignored, completely skipped over Reforged CTPs. However, I'm starting to dip my big toe, just my big toe, into the waters of Reforged CTPs. I have quite a few Reforged CTPs when it comes to PvP, namely Regeneration and Authority, so I will give you more in-depth guide on that when we get to those CTPs. I'll mention both types of Reforged CTPs and who you want to sort of categorize them for. But more recently, I've also tried with the newest CTP of Destruction, the Mighty Destruction, and I've gotten quite a bit of feedback from players using the Reforged CTP of Greed. I only have one character that has one right now, Cersei, but I will give you my advice on that. Just keep in mind that generally speaking, the Reforged CTPs have not changed what they're good for. So, you know, offensive, PvE oriented CTPs are going to remain so for reforging, and they're going to remain for those value for that kind of value. And then PvP CTPs, when you reforge them, they're still going to be PvP CTPs. However, if you're wondering why should you even care about reforging, well, some CTPs I would spend very little time talking about before they got the reforging opportunity, basically the option, because they were basically useless or next to useless or just very average, very mundane. But now with reforging, they are new life has been breathed into them. So you may want to consider sacrificing one to make a more useful item, right? Rather than having two cars that can't drive on the road, you somehow mash them together because you're an alchemist or whatever, and suddenly you have a car that can drive on the highway and you're good to go. It's kind of a crude explanations, a metaphor type thing. So anyways, moving on to our first CTP here, the CTP of Judgment. I'm gonna go a little bit quicker here so we can get to the more front-ended document heavy or sort of information heavy CTPs. Not a lot has changed for the CTP in the last few updates. Luna got a new uniform. Wolverine is pretty much the only big new name you will see recommended for CTP of Judgment. There are some notables that didn't quite make the list, like Captain America with his new Phoenix Force uniform, but in general we've seen updates recently like Shang-Chi and the rest of the original characters besides Luna, and then the Eternals, where there's basically just no elemental damage dealing characters. So this list is basically intact and it has been basically this way for the past like 4 or 5 months. The hierarchy of best elemental damage characters goes, you know, Super Giant and Mephisto sort of flip-flop, and then you have Rogue. Rogue may not be the best. Like, you may argue that some other characters can be a little bit better for her, depending on what you need them for, but Rogue really struggles without a Judgment. So this list is simultaneously the best characters, but also the ones that need it the most. It really, you know, it's like 70% best, and then 30% like this character sucks without the Judgment kind of thing. But keep in mind that most of these characters, you can flip-flop them from a Judgment over to a Rage for things like ABX, and that goes doubly for Scarlet Witch, Ghost Rider, Luna Snow, Wolverine, and Apocalypse, so they can sort of go back and forth. And then in terms of when a Judgment is going to outpace a Rage for things like ABX, it's really when you get into like the very high rolled Mighties or the low rolled brilliant CTPs of Judgment. So in general, I would say if you're just rocking regular Judgments, you can save them for other characters that you're not going to use in ABX, and then just swap the Judgment in place of a Rage if you're just going to chuck the character into ABX anyways. Like if you're building up Ghost Rider, but you're just planning him to use him for Universal Hero for ABX, save the Judgment for someone else. So you're going to use it in World Boss Ultimate, World Boss Legend, and just chuck a Rage on him. But that's basically how the list turns out for Judgment there. Next up, we have the Egg. This is very straightforward, guys. Not many characters are good for the Egg. It's not a very good CTP. Hopefully, when it gets reforging, it will be more worthwhile, but at this point, it's just used as fodder for trying to roll brilliant CTPs of other varieties that are not Eggs. So I honestly, I list 9 characters here. The second place character is just a placeholder to imply that it's not a good CTP. but I would generally speaking not give a refinement to any of these characters except maybe Destroyer, just to be a pylon and soak up a bunch of damage in Alliance Conquest or something like that, or maybe Timeline Battle. But all of these other characters are either so bad that the refinement's not going to do anything for them, or in the case of Black Dwarf, he's so good that you're better off giving him anything else. I kind of feel bad putting him here. He shouldn't be on this list for the egg, but he technically has guard break immunity, so he can take advantage of the CTP's strengths without the weakness or the big drawback for PvP, which is that it lacks guard break immunity. But please, I don't want to have any angry phone calls from Alliance mates. Hey, my Alliance mate just equipped an egg on Black Dwarf. It's your fault, Alex. Don't give any characters the egg. Don't give Black Dwarf the egg. Let's just leave it at that. Next one we have is Greed. Now, here's where things get a little bit more complicated. In the past, this is a brand new list for the Greed, by the way. In the past, I've said there's basically one character for the CTP of Greed. That's Jean Grey, and that's it. And then there was a placeholder in the second place of another ghost character, and then there was just 8 other options that were just like random, not random, but just, you know, risky, dicey picks. However, this has changed with the CTP of Greed reforging. They've added a new mechanic to the Greed when you reforge it, when you combine 2 Greeds into one. And I'll quickly go over to my Cersei so I can show you guys what this looks like. And basically what it does is it adds something called Ambush. Now, all of the reforged CTPs, just to give you guys a quick run through, they have 2 options when you roll them as either Mighty or Brilliant. They can either roll with their unique ability, and all of the CTPs have one, all of the reforgeable CTPs have one unique ability that's only on that CTP, so they don't share abilities. They either roll their unique ability, or they roll an attack-defense combination. So for example, my Hulk, actually, never mind, not my Hulk. I think my Sentry has an attack defense buff, a plus 16% to all attack and all defense. That's the same for all of the CTPs. Now, whether it's Mighty or it's Brilliant, that percentage can go higher, but generally speaking, for the vast majority of reforged CTPs, you do not want the all attack, all defense buff. You want the unique ability, because the unique ability is what's going to change these CTPs and give them, you know, more of a threat, because now they have multiple abilities. So on top of having the ignore dodge, on top of having the small heal, and on top of having the rotating damage to either speed universals or combat blast, what makes the Greed, the Brilliant and the Mighty, not the Billy, the Mighty and the Brilliant Greed, what makes it interesting is the Ambush. And the Ambush, as you can see there in brackets, it ignores the enemy's damage decrease. Apparently, it also reduces how much reflect damage you take. So if you really hate dying to reflect damage from characters like Silver Surfer, apparently Ambush also does that. There you go. Immunity to damage reflected by enemies, and damage decrease ignore, and it also gives you immunity to guard break and super guard break. So Ambush has a whole bunch of different abilities stacked into one, but the really important ones are that it ignores part of the damage reduction that your enemy has or your enemy team has, and then it also ignores reflect damage, so you won't take damage that is reflected back at you from characters like Colossus, Luke Cage, Silver Surfer. So what makes the Reforged Greed important is with the ignore enemy damage decrease, you basically get this big burst of basically true damage. So in the same way that we thought we think that pierce damage gives you basically the ability to deal true damage to bosses in PvE content, the Greed CTP essentially gives you that opportunity to do to other players in PvP. So other players will stack Colossus support, they'll stack Ebony Maw support, and they'll stack a whole bunch of damage reduction. They'll even use a Mighty or a Brilliant CTP of Authority to give themselves like tons of damage reduction. And if you've ever fought Dr. Doom with a Brilliant Authority, when the Steel ability activates, which gives you damage reduction, you can't do any damage to Doom, because he has Ebony and Colossus, especially if you're using a universal character. You do 1 damage or 2 damage. This is where the CTP of Greed comes in. So this CTP becomes kind of like a ticking time bomb, where your character using a Reforged Greed will have these, you know, lulls in damage, and then when the ambush ability procs, it literally ambushes your enemy, and you get this humongous burst of damage that's just going to shred your opponent. So I've got a list here of 10 characters. We've got Sentry, Jean Grey, Doctor Doom, Quicksilver, Silver Surfer, Cersei, Daredevil, Molecule Man, Evil, Captain Marvel, and then Null. And so the interesting thing here is all of these characters, or almost all of these characters minus Molecule Man, have iframe ignore, and most of them have a revive. And that's important because you'll be able to trigger the ambush proc more, and you'll be able to get more opportunities to pop this crazy, high burst damage of ambush buffed hits that'll just wipe your opponent. It's especially potent for Sentry because he combines really high offense with a short cooldown iframe ignore first skill with his revive and his super tankiness. But Dr. Doom is also a good option for it. I'm not saying these are the best CTPs for these characters, but for those people that like sort of high risk, high reward PvP gameplay, you're basically, a bazooka with a short fuse. It may blow up in your face, you may lose because your character has no defensive abilities besides that small heal. But on the flip side, with the greed, if it pops off properly, and especially if the ambush proc lines up with the damage proc that matches your opponent, it's lights out. You can fight some enemies. I think Carl LCL, one of the more popular Vibranium Challenger players, he has a brilliant greed on his Sentry. Go give him a try in PvP and see what happens. He erases characters. He's erased my Gilgamesh with 600,000 HP. It's that potent for dealing with super tanky, super defensive characters. But of course it comes with its drawbacks. So the greed has really become a much more interesting and much more tactful CTP when it got reforging. Unfortunately, the regular greed does not get any better. So I'm, giving you this advice and I'm explaining this in depth, but I want to put the asterisk, the PSA up, is this only, all of this information on this list, this ranking only applies to the reforged CTPs of greed, mighty, and brilliant. And I can say with pretty much certainty, for null at least, you have to go all the way to brilliant. Mighty is not good enough to really make him a boomstick that's going to make your opponent sort of shake in their boots. So that's it for greed. If you have more questions down below in the comments, you can hit me up and I can try to answer them. Next up, we're just gonna fly really quickly through Transcendence and Patience. These are both subpar CTPs. They're not good. They seem good because they give attack and they give invincibility, but they're just very weak. I would highly recommend not equipping them on characters because in the future, if you want to reforge, you're just going to spend the crystals to unequip them. So the lists for these from Moon Girl down to Ultron have not changed. None of these characters are meta. None of these characters are worth CTPs. And actually, you're much better off giving Wave an Insight CTP for her abilities as a support lead buff rather than a Judgment, or rather than a Patience or a Transcendence. So I highly recommend just hoarding those CTPs and then sacrificing them for CTP reforging in the future. Then we have the CTP of Insight. This is the support CTP. Not much has changed here either. We have the addition of White Fox tier 3 recently, and then you have Proxima tier 3 and an Ebony tier 3 and things like that. But this list remains largely unchanged. I did have Thena here. I forgot to update this. I did have Thena here in the 10th spot because at the time, she wasn't very good. This was pre-buff that I made this list. I have updated the rage list for her post-buff. But yeah, you could give Thena an Insight, I guess, for her leadership support abilities. But I think a better 10th option there, which still sort of matches the motif because it's an Eternal, would be Icarus. If you had to make a full PvP or PvE team with like Icarus, Thena, and Cersei, or something like, it's going to be Icarus, Cersei, and one other character. Icarus is basically the one that's going to hold you back defensively or offensively, so he's the one that's going to want the Insight if you had to give one of the 3 Insight. You wouldn't want to give it to Cersei, you wouldn't want to give it to Thena or Gilgamesh in terms of PvP or PvE, so it would fall on Icarus's shoulders, but yeah, he's 10th place there. But largely the CTP remains unchanged and non-reforgeable. Moving on to Authority, this is another complicated one because of the recent practice and sort of notes that I've been able to take, testing that I've been able to do with reforged CTPs of Authority. So again, just like other reforged CTPs, you can either roll attack defense on the Authority, or you can roll the ability Steal, which gives you like guard break immunity, super guard break immunity, and it also gives you damage reduction. So the Authority is really good for PvP, obviously. The reforged Authority is even better for PvP when it comes to very tanky characters who either can heal a lot, or they have other abilities but they're lacking damage reduction. So I know they gave it back to Wolverine, but previously with his Phoenix uniform he didn't have any damage reduction, so a mighty or brilliant Authority was basically 100% necessary for him. It's still sort of necessary for Wolverine because he has enough HP, he has enough bulk that he really just needs to reduce the amount of incoming damage. But you can see the list is just all PvP, and these are all characters that are very tanky. Pretty much the only non-tanky character here is Daredevil, but again, he doesn't have enough HP to justify a regen, so you just want to build him to take as little damage per hit as possible, to dodge the damage that he is taking, and then to, you know, counter back with his third skill, iframe ignore. So this list remains largely unchanged. It's just the meta fluctuation of the combat bulky characters coming to the top, the Gilgameshes, the Wolverines, who can really take advantage of the steal ability on the Reforged Authority. This list is almost the same for a regular authority. However, Wolverine and Gilgamesh would drop significantly. They would drop down to like 6th or 7th place, because with just a regular authority, they can't make up for the difference in HP and damage that they're taking to make as much of a difference, and therefore I think then a regen might be better for them, but it's kind of up in the air. Moving on to energy CTP. So the energy CTP, it has reforging. We know what it does, the charge up with the extra pierce damage. Pretty straightforward. The list here has not changed too much aside from the new entries. We have Makari, who obviously just shakes up the game, being so amazing. The only reason why Makari isn't higher is because you can also use her for ABX and other content with a rage, whereas Moonstone and Sharon don't make quite as much use out of a rage as Makari does. And then the big player here, Loki, just so amazing. Yes, he can also use an energy, but he's just so clutch with a rage for dispatch, for dimension missions, or dimension rifts, I should say, and of course ABX. And then we have the usual players here, you know, Null, Doctor Doom, Beta Ray Bill kind of thing. And actually Captain America, I put him 9th. He's actually not bad. He's quite good with the CTP of energy. It's a difficult rotation, but I think he, you know, could be one of the 10 best characters with a regular energy. When it comes to reforging energy, I don't have as much experience, so this list may change if you have mighty and brilliant energies, but I definitely think that those top 3, top 4 characters are worth your investment. If that's the case, then that's the route you want to take. Then we have the CTP of Regeneration, and this is another CTP that I have more experience lately with reforging, so I will talk a little bit about that. For the regen, unlike the other CTPs, there is a bit of a toss-up between characters that you want to have the penetration, which is that interruption ability, or characters that you want to have the all attack, all defense buff, like I have on my Sentry. So I talked about how all the other CTPs don't care about the all attack, all defense buff. Regen is the one exception, because for a lot of characters for PvP, they're so bulky, they have so much HP, so much defense, that you just want to stack more and more of that. And the penetration chance doesn't really matter, because these characters are not going to swiftly interrupt you and then one-shot you the way that other characters will. You know, Gilgamesh, Luke Cage, they don't rely on one big burst of damage suddenly. They do kind of with their awakening skill, but it's more about sort of a slower build up with the accumulation and sort of chipping you down, interrupting your iframes, interrupting your healing skill, whatever it may be, with their iframe ignore skill, and then finally getting over you by just, you know, the battle of endurance. So that's why for regeneration it's a little bit tricky. With some characters you definitely want the penetration chance, like I would say maybe Molecule Man, you want the penetration chance, or Silver Surfer. But when it comes to, especially because in Silver Surfer's case he's kind of a really good example, if he can pop that penetration and interrupt you, and then if his third skill is close to cooldown, then he, you know, the AI may pop the third skill and then catch you and bounce all that damage, and boom, kind of boom goes the dynamite kind of thing. But when it comes to characters like Luke Cage, when it comes to characters like Gilgamesh, Immortal Hulk, the all attack, all defense is actually better, especially on the Brilliance, where you can get up to 32% increase attack and defense. And with the changing of PvP teams, especially with the Eternals, where you can use Cersei to give debuff, you don't need to use a debuff lead anymore. So you can use Gilgamesh's lead, for example, and his lead provides you with 50% all defense. So you stack that 50% all defense with another 16 to 32 on the mighty or brilliant regen, and you're looking at close to 100% increase all defense. And what we've seen from characters in this year, and as power creep, you know, gets higher and higher, not only is Netmarble adding characters that have higher attack stats, but for PvP, they're adding characters that have higher defense stats. Go ahead and look at Gilgamesh's defensive stats with his uniform, and then go ahead and even look at like Sentry's defensive stats. And Sentry's a native tier 3, or look at Mephisto's or something like that. Like, it's night and day. These characters have crazy defensive stats for PvP. So that's basically how it shakes out for regen. You could add, let's say, Wolverine to the bottom of this list instead of Rescue, but for Rescue, the regen is more just for things like Alliance Conquest. I wouldn't give her like a mighty or a brilliant regen in that case, but that's basically how it shakes out for the regen and for the reforgings. We're gonna skip ahead to Rage and then do Destruction at the end because of the reforging. Rage is basically the last CTP that a lot of players are waiting to be reforged, but as it currently stands, the list for Rage candidates largely consists of ABX Pro characters and then a couple of characters that just don't work without a Rage because they aren't proc friendly and they don't deal elemental damage. So you've got, your Scarlet Witches, your Wolverines, your Corvuses, your Lunas and your Lokis and your Makaris and your Athenas, who are all very good for ABX, or, top of the line or second place. And then you have characters like Doctor Strange and Shang-Chi. Now, they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, but they represent the same thing in my opinion. These characters don't have elemental damage, don't have proc-friendly rotation, so Rage is basically the only option for them. And in Shang-Chi's case, it's the best option for him because his rotation and his skill combos are so bizarre that you basically need to be paying attention to that 24/7 and not really paying attention to your Rage proc. And the fact that he gives himself 90% chain hit damage on his tier 3, and the fact that you can charge his tier 3 so quickly makes him super clutch. And you basically, when you activate the Rage and his tier 3, you've got multiple CTPs activating at the same time, essentially, right? You've got way more pierce or way more chain hit than any energy could give you, plus you have all the benefits of the Rage as well. So this CTP is also going to generally be better for characters that you're going to run through Dispatch or Dimension Rifts, because a lot of the enemies in those game modes have very high defenses and you want to try to cut through that. But yeah, generally speaking, Rage is ABX centric and some World Boss Ultimate, World Boss Legend centric for specific characters who just need this CTP, but otherwise it hasn't changed too much. And then last but not least, we come to Destruction. Now this one is tricky, but my ranking here, like Greed, is completely dependent on you reforging your Destruction. So again, if you have a regular Destruction, these are not the best characters to equip it on. You should reforge your Destruction and get a Mighty, or if you're super lucky, get a Brilliant, and then equip it on one of these characters. And the reason for that is, if you look at the regular stats on a Destruction, it's just a regular Obelisk. It's a crit damage, ignore dodge, 200 proc Obelisk, or sorry, not ignore dodge. It's a crit damage, guard break immunity, 200 proc Obelisk, with an additional chance to penetrate. But that chance to penetrate is just so small, and it's only for 5 seconds, that it's just not going to make enough of an impact in PvP. But when you reforge your Destruction, this is where you get a very interesting CTP, and in my opinion, you get the first hybrid CTP, which is basically what the Destruction was when it was originally introduced. It was originally introduced, and it's like, wow, we have this proc for World Boss and other PvE content, but we have penetration and guard break for PvP. This is a really cool hybrid CTP. But as times changed, as Regen came out and ignored the penetration and things like that, this CTP just sort of fell into complete disuse. But now, let me navigate away from this page. The CTP of Destruction has a much more interesting ability, and that is the Strike ability. Again, the Mighty and the Brilliant Destructions can either roll all attack, all defense, which you don't want, or the Strike, and you 100% want the Strike ability, because the Strike ability, not only does it increase the damage that you deal to boss types, which is super clutch for PvE, it also gives you 100% ignore dodge, which is good for PvE and PvP, okay, which is really good. And then it keeps all of the rest of the abilities that the Obelisk or CTP has, which are still good for PvP and can go beyond. So the 30% chance to penetrate can actually go up to, I believe, 50% if you have a Brilliant. 50% is much better than 30%, it's almost double. And then you also still retain the crit damage and the guard break immunity. Not to mention the fact that we've seen with the most recent update that brought the reforging for Destruction, characters that seem to fit the Destruction very, very well. So going back to my ranking here, Hela is an amazing target for the Destruction because the extra boss damage is going to synergize with the damage procs that she already has on her only damaging skill, which is her 6th skill, her ult, or her ultimate skill, and it just creates this massive burst of damage. But then the penetration covers her weakness in PvP, and she's obviously good for PvP because of her uniform and uniform effect. And then her artifact covers her defenses and her lack of a revive and her lack of, massive recovery healing. So yeah, Reforged CTP of Destruction actually super, like it fits Hela like a glove. And similarly, Heimdall, it fits Heimdall like a glove. It gives him the extra burst damage that he needs to punch through PvE targets and World Boss Legend and things like that, because his damage is a little bit lackluster. But then for PvP, it gives him the penetration he needs, gives him the guard break immunity, and the strike for the ignore dodge. He already has some ignore dodge, but you know, it really helps. And then of course his artifact covers up his defenses, his HP, heat, like lack of a heal and stuff like that. But in addition to having a few characters recently that really fit destruction like a glove, we have existing characters that have enough chain hit in their base kit, or just for whatever reason can take better advantage of a mighty destruction than a regular energy, or in some cases a mighty energy, a reforged energy. And in general, reforged energies are much less attractive because the base energy CTP is so strong, and that's what sort of makes reforging a destruction logical. The base CTP of destruction is not good, but the mighty one is really good and can replace or, you know, outpace a regular or mighty energy in some cases. So we have testing done. You can find videos online. Moonstone doing better with a mighty destruction. Moon Knight, both of the moons. Characters like Cable, possibly Yelena. That one's a little bit asterisk, sort of, you know, your mileage may vary type of thing. And then still those staple, not as good as they were before, but those staple PvP characters, Alliance Conquest characters, who can revive and pop their Transcendence skill. You got the Warriors of the Sky minus War Tiger. You got the Sunbird, Shadow Shell, and Blue Dragon combo. The last one there, the evil Captain Marvel, that one sort of occurred to me recently. That might be a really good option for her, because with the introduction of Hela, heroes are sort of, they have a little bit, you know, they have a little bit of a mountain to climb against Hela teams, and they can be more easily knocked down or sort of hunted with Hela. And then Captain Marvel's new uniform gives her a whole bunch of damage against villains. So it kind of creates this two-way scenario. I'm not saying that, you know, it's going to be the best fit for her, but generally speaking for Captain Marvel, it was either destruction, rage, or regen. Now I'm thinking with all the extra buffs to destruction and the fact that she doesn't have very much, if any, ignore dodge, and the fact that she can leverage with her passive that increases the amount of buffs she gets, she can increase that strike buff even higher than whatever 120 or 160% with her buff, Carol Core buff thing. So yeah, those are my rankings. You know, the ones for the recent reforged CTPs, the recently reforged destruction and greed. These ones are a little bit more subject to change, so take those suggestions with a little bit more of an asterisk. Don't jump in feet first and then, you know, get too upset about results if the mileage varies a little bit there. But those are my rankings for all 10 usable, you know, available CTPs. Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of the list and the rankings. Hopefully this has been helpful. Smash the like button if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.